Hello and welcome back. We're going to start doing the final haul on this alien attack fighter next, which will be good because this has been sitting around for ages and I'm keen to get it done. So the rear end was really ropey. I've managed to fix that gap that ran all the way along here with some acrylic, which I cut to shape and just inserted in and glued them all in, and then added a little bit of resin from the back. I've then filled it in and done a rudimentary kind of detailing on here. Hey, I'm not going to obsess over it, that's what it is and that's how it came from the factory, so to speak. I've added a rough internal cockpit in there. Little walls with a few greeblies and a bit of fibre optic on. I had to squeeze those in here and glue them in. The back end's got two etched panels on the back, which you'll see light up later, and there's another wall on that side. The problem that I've got with these is that they're ridiculously breakable. I mean, they just crumble. Yeah, I don't like those. If I put them on, I think they'll break over time, so you just squash them and they just crumble. So I'm not going to use them. What I'm going to do is put in something relatively similar, which is this, I think it's a 3mm plastic card strip. Had to put these recessed so that this still fits on. I've got to put magnetic closure in that section there. So these are the fibre optics that come out of the back of the console. I dremeled out the frame on the main model and added these little magnets into recesses underneath each one of these. What I intend to do now is get this to fit snugly on top of those magnetic connections. So this is what I'm going to attempt to do. You can either see me make a mess of it or it's going to work. There's the magnet that we want to attach. I'm going to put a piece of plastic bag over the top of that I've cut out, and I'm going to add the magnet corresponding to the lid. To get these to match perfectly, because they're all different angles, they're all over the place, I'm going to add filler to each of the corners of this. So we'll slap a bit of that on there. So I've got it loaded up with 4 corners of filler. Now I'm going to put it in place. Over the top of my plastic bag. And just make sure I've got my surfaces nicely sorted. A little bit of bleed here onto the model, but that's okay, that should break off in a minute when I've let it go through its rubbery phase and doing the bit with the scalpel. You'd imagine that this corner here where it's squeezed out would be an issue, touching the top of this surface here, but it won't be, because when it goes through its rubbery stage it separates from whatever it's stuck to. It's very weird stuff. There's like 3 stages for car filler. You've got the super loose stage, which it's at the moment, where you can actually spread it and smooth it and do all sorts of things with it. Then you get a stage where it gets a bit rubbery, and that's the stage where you can either separate it from the surface that you're working on, or you can cut it with a knife to give yourself a perfect edge on the filler. That's what I'm trying to do. That will instantly get rid of this, line it up with this edge that's already here, and remove the material all in one hit. So we're just waiting for this to become resistant to the blade. It's starting to skin over now. It's not quite as gooey as it was. So a couple of minutes and we'll be ready to cut that. But you have to be careful you don't put pressure on it to lift it off the surface it's trying to adhere to. So I'll only do one cut, then I'll let it go harder, then I'll remove the thing. But I will probably take this piece out while it's still rubbery, because if that goes hard, any contact areas are not going to come off. So where are we? Yeah, we're about there now. So here we go. One slice just down the edge of that panel. That then gives us a cut edge, and because this is rubbery, see there's like a bend to it, you can maneuver it, it fractures. There's no adhesion to it at this stage, so it's super handy stuff to work with. But if you leave it too long, it'll go rock hard, and then you've got issues. Yep, I'm going to lift it. So I'm going to start on this edge and just take it off like that. Now that gives us somewhat of a weird shape underneath, but we don't care because we know that matches the shape of this perfectly. It's going to be all weird, it's going to be all funky, yeah, whatever. We know that the magnets adhere to the other magnets because they were stuck in place when I put it down. So everything on there, despite how weird it looks, should match perfectly the shape of the magnets on the inside of this model. May fill that undercut underneath that magnet just to give it more adhesion. I'm just going to sand these two bits of filler off the front edge here. Okay, that gives me a little bit of clearance if I need it. Let's see if it fits. There you go. Perfect. A magnetic lid for the bottom. All the surfaces line up perfectly, despite the magnets being all over the place underneath. We don't care. Happy days. Bonk. Done. Okay, so now there's a bit of primer on there, and these dodgy edges that I've had to fill and sand, I've done them roughly so that it kind of matches in with the rest of it. But I don't like the way that you can see clearly that the detail just disappears on the edge there. I'm going to chase some of these details around the edge, and what I'm going to use for that is a triangular file. So I'm just looking for any line, like a panel line, that I can settle this into. It snaps into place, and then you can do what you like. You just chase it round. Like I say, the finish on this model is pretty minimal, so I'm not paying too much attention to this. I'm just doing it. Don't care really where they go. I'm not trying to match anything on the opposite side. In fact, I think the opposite side is completely different anyway. So, makes no odds. Get that in there, that'd be good. Get into that one, that's also good. I don't know if you can see, but it's adding detail to that filled edge. Anyway, you get the idea, don't you? So we're in primer, ready to go. I'm going to use a taupe grey, which is a Toyota colour. I'm going to spray it into the lid, then put it in my airbrush and just blast all the recesses. Just with a quick hit, I want to bring it to a slightly more brown flavour. Okay, so here we are. What a mess, eh? What a lot of squiggling and what a lot of messing about. The reason that I've done all those squiggles is because I want to make it organic, and I want that to kind of permeate through a little bit through the next few layers, so it gives it that more kind of capillary, sort of veiny type difference in colour under your skin, you know, all that kind of thing. So pretty much the same technique as you'd use on a figure, doing all the greens and the blues and all the other weird colours that you wouldn't think was in human skin. I'm going to go a bit darker in the recesses now with more of a sort of Germany grey, but less blue. I'm looking at a colour that I've not found yet. So I'm probably going to use the same taupe grey and add a little matte black with a touch of white, I think. Adding a little bit of thinners to this one because I want it to be a bit more recess friendly. So what I'm doing here is just taking the edges of these recesses back a touch more. Now I'm not worried about it bleeding onto these top surfaces here, because I'm going over them with a different paint treatment shortly, and that is going to only attack the high spots, so anything that bleeds over these edges I can sharpen up later. Right, so happy with this. Recesses are darker now. The engine situation has a little bit of contrast going on. It's picking out the details of the shape of the panels a little bit. Got the edges nice, so that's all right. It's still looking a bit bland, obviously. No detail on it yet, really. This is just like a basic sketch on the surface as to what we want to do. But it's like coming on nicely. I can see where it's going to happen once I start to get into the next layer, painting it with plastic bags. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so I'm going in with the same again, a little bit more black this time. Right, so I guess you're thinking, what the hell has he done now? Because I've just gone over all the little panel lines and all the raised panel details on there with the dark colour. And now it looks absolutely disgusting, doesn't it? So next stage is plastic bag time. Yeah, this is the good bit. Something that I messed around with a few years ago on a Lindbergh model. Something I messed around with on a Lindbergh model quite a while ago, and I like the results, so I'm going to try it on this studio scale version. So I've taped a bit of plastic to my bench. I've got myself a nice plastic bag. I'm going to scrunch it up. I'm going to pour the paint mix that I've got ready there onto the plastic, dip it in it, and then apply it to the surface of the model. I'm simply going to mix a little bit up. This is primer grey, the taupe grey, and I'm going to just pour a bit of that onto the plastic. Then I'm going to scrunch this up so I get loads of little edges, many as I can get, just a mess. I want this thing to be, you know, fairly random, but I don't want it to be too blobby. Dipping it into there, and I'm just going to dab it onto the surface of the model. We're not worried about texture with this application because there's so much surface texture on the model anyway that it's not going to make any difference at all. So just going to apply some of this in dots and dabs all over it. Right, so that's the first pass with a plastic bag over the top of those black lines, and the aim is really to disappear these black lines as much as possible. so that you end up with just the shadow line in the gap. So we're a long way off, but you can see the kind of texture it makes on the surface. I think it's really cool. It picks out all the high spots. Notice how I shaded over that line, and that pass has now blended it and left the shading behind it. The same with the panels next to it. That's the kind of effect that I'm after. I want that weird alien kind of skin look. There's not enough on here. You can still see the airbrushing through it, but you can see how it's highlighted these raised lines and left a shadow each side from where I did the airbrush press. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to go in now with a different colour. See, it's looking pretty good on top there. Still need 2 or 3 other colours to go on top of this to disguise this pre-shading, but it's looking pretty good. Hopefully you can see what we've got going on there now. That's loads and loads of plastic bags splattering, as you just saw. Some of the lines are disappearing nicely. These are still a little bit pronounced. I'm not really too happy with that, so I'll go over that now with a much finer splat. Some of the shaded areas, like this section here, have been breached a little by the plastic bag. The plastic bag stuff highlights the edge nicely, but I want to get rid of this little bit of bleed just inside there to redefine that edge a little more. And because this grey is the darkest colour that we can see on here at the moment, it's popping out. If I put something darker onto the model, that's going to drop back and become more like the background. So now I'm going to go in with a little bit of a wash and just try and pick out some more of these dark recess details. That'll jump the contrast up between this and make these a lot less visible to the eye. So that's my plan. Here we go. I ended up going with a much darker shade of brown for the engine and detail bits, just to make it match a little bit more the reference that I was looking at. I went for a decking brown, followed by a wash with a little bit of matte black spray on there, and also a black flory wash. On the top section here, I used the decking brown, a black wash, highlights of copper and a little couple of silver highlights in there. There's a couple of extra wires put in there from solder, dead easy to bend, just glue them in place. There's quite a shiny finish on here, so I've gone for a satin finish on this, which gives you a little bit of reflection, which pulls out the highlights on all these little details at the back. But I noticed on the reference that the brown colour running through these lines fades a lot to the front. So this section here has been left in a matte finish with a little bit more taupe grey on there. And the taupe grey is the colour that I've used for the main mandible area. I quite like the matte finish of it and the way it looked. That's had a black flory wash on it. Got 2mm perspex in the windows now. These raised surface ones are picked out beautifully. The shading on each side has been squashed a bit by the tamping, but it's also picked out the raised surface detail, which gives you these beautiful sharp lines with a graduation either side, and then the texture over the graduation, which looks really nice. No gloss on these. This is just the colour of the primers, so you get a nice difference in the surface reflection of these little things, but it's picked out the detail beautifully on it, just the way that I wanted. I've tried to follow the shading of the original one by adding darker and lighter patches of the splodges and a touch of airbrushing between the layers, just to bring that up a bit. So we've got this nice kind of shaded section that runs across this panel here. But again, that's got texture on the top of it, but that was an interim airbrush between the texture layers, which worked out really good. This is the removable flat for the lighting. And what I did, super simple, I've got a white, what have I got? I've got a green LED here with a bit of black paint on it to reduce its intensity. And shoved in the side of this tube is a flashing blue 3mm LED. These are instantly replaceable, no problem at all. And at the back there's a white LED. It's so simple, it's insane, but it provides enough detail to make the thing pop. So with the lighting, there's scratch built interior made from model kits. I made 3 seats out of Super Sculpey, popped them in the oven. That took me 10 minutes, so there's not an awful lot of time invested in this interior. I've squeezed as much as I can in there just to give an impression. Here we go, let's have a look inside. So now you can see the scratch built side walls. At the back there I made a double layer with the etched clear, diffusing the white, the warm white, and then a black layer with little holes cut in it for all the details. And you know, looks okay to me. That'll do the job. I decided to light it predominantly from the front to catch the front edge of the details, rather than having a roof light which would flood it from the top, and I didn't want that. I'm more than happy with it. For the time invested, I think it looks the part. So there you go, hope you like it. It's been a cool model to make, even though it was really knackered when I started. It came out all right, looks the part. And you wouldn't even notice the rough fixes because the rest of the surface is so alien and knackered that everything blends in really nicely. So the finishing on the sides here was just dead simple, no problem at all, and actually looked quite authentic. I think it's time for a montage. If you want to see any more crazy model stuff, pop a subscribe on there and a notification, and yeah, you'll see more of these weird models that you probably never ever see again. Right, take care, thanks for watching, and yeah, I'll see you soon.